Today, the high seas are becoming dangerous again near Somalia.
Dad, we have been captured by pirates, and this is my last voice note. I'm not sure if I will get a chance to speak to you again. They are taking us away to execute us. If I made any mistakes, please forgive me.
A desperate message from a sailor at sea and 3 vessels hijacked in just a week. Is the war on Iran to blame for rising piracy? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. Hey everyone. Before we go on with today's show, remember to leave us a comment telling us what you think about this episode and what stories you want us to do next. And if you're listening on a podcast app, leave us a review telling us where you're listening from, and feel free to give us a 5-star rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show.
My name is Mohamed Gabobe. I'm a Somali journalist based in the capital, Mogadishu.
Mohamed, welcome to The Take. It is really good to have you. I want to start with a voice note that's been circulating online for a few days now. I'm sure you've heard it. It is from a Pakistani sailor aboard a ship that was seized by Somali pirates in late April. And in it, the sailor is bidding a tearful farewell to his family. So let's play a clip.
Please look after Aisha and the kids. Give them good education. Keep your heart strong. It's okay. What else can I say?
Can you walk us through what we know about what happened to his ship?
Yes, that ship is called Honor 25. It was hijacked on the 22nd of April, about 30 nautical miles off the coast of Somalia. So it was in the port of Berbera en route to Mogadishu, but prior to that, it made a detour and went to the Strait of Hormuz before turning around and heading to Mogadishu. As it was going off the northern Somali coast is when it was attacked by gunmen and overran. In the days that followed, that ship is still being held hostage by the gunmen off the Somali coast.
Wow. And do we know what that means for the sailors who are on board?
There is about 17 hostages, or I should say crew members, on board from an array of countries such as Pakistan, Malaysia, Sri Lanka, and so forth. Aside from what I've seen online with the videos and the voice notes, circulating, there isn't much known about them. But what is known so far is that it's been over 2.5, 3 weeks. They're still being held hostage. No one has seen them. No one really knows their current health conditions. To my knowledge, the Somali authorities have not released an official statement addressing this issue. But what they have been doing when I speak to security officials behind the closed doors is that they've been talking with the individuals on this hijacked oil tanker, Honor 25, telling them to come off and things of that nature. But what the hijackers are doing right now is they're moving up and down the Somali coast. They don't want to go far out at sea. If they do, they'll possibly encounter international navies, But they cannot get off the ship either because there's Somali security forces on land. So it's kind of like a cat and mouse game at the moment, what's unfolding.
Okay, so Mohamed, I know that you have been hard at work these days because you have the details of what happened to this ship, but it's not just this ship. This is not the only hijacking we've seen in recent days. The seaway where East Africa and the southern tip of the Arabian Peninsula meet, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Gulf of Aden, is quickly becoming dangerous again. Since April 20th, we've seen 3, possibly 4 vessels seized in those waters in just a week.
On Monday, the cargo vessel Sword was hijacked near the Somali port of Barakat. On Thursday, armed men reportedly attempted to board a cargo ship from a small boat south of Isle, Somalia. In a separate incident, a Somali-flagged fishing vessel was seized. On April 22nd, the oil tanker Honor 25 was taken near Somalia's northeastern coast.
UK maritime trade operations has now raised the threat level there to substantial. So what is going on?
Yes, what you have unfolding in the Gulf of Aden, Indian Ocean, and as you mentioned, the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, I think it's a deteriorating situation. And I think it's actually unprecedented because, as you know, piracy has been an issue in Somalia for a long time. But over the past decade or so, it's calmed down a lot. But now it's just spiking. I think there's a number of factors. But the thing is, what I believe no one expected is the rate that it's happening. You have every couple of days past, Either there's a successful hijacking or an attempted hijacking. So
Hmm.
this is very unprecedented. And at the same time, it's going to affect maritime traffic. We know the Strait of Hormuz is currently closed. So that means more traffic is going to go through strategic waterways in that region, which are close to Somalia. Insurance premiums going to go up on a lot of these ships if these hijacks keep happening. So it's a very volatile situation.
Okay, you mentioned the Strait of Hormuz, which leads me to the question, why now? Is that the answer? Why are we seeing these hijackings happening right now?
I think it's a mix of both. I believe one factor can be is illegal foreign fishing. It's not to justify their actions, but it's to let you know that once people get pushed to the brink, they'll do things like this. Because as long as illegal foreign fishing continues in Somali waters, it's going to lead to more and more people being pushed further into poverty. This forces certain segments of society to take up arms. Another factor where you have is
Hmm.
I view it as kind of like opportunistic criminals. And what I mean by that is the Strait of Hormuz is closed. You have more traffic going through Somali waters. And prior to that, you had a lot of tension in the Bab el-Mandeb Strait and the Red Sea with these Houthi attacks on different ships. This has focused a lot of international navies towards Yemen and the Strait of Hormuz, giving armed groups which are active on Somali coastline, a window of opportunity to carry out attacks. As you can see with the oil
Hmm.
tankers, the cement carriers, and so forth.
So let's say all eyes are on places elsewhere than the waters off the coast of Somalia. And so this is just an opportune moment for several reasons. Okay, well, Mohammed, before we go much further, I want to talk about terminology here because it's something I'm actually seeing from people online. And I want to understand first why these ships may have been targeted for piracy, because earlier you mentioned oil. That seems like a thing that people might want to take advantage of to take by illegal means, the definition of piracy. But then when we use that term pirates and piracy, what gets left out?
I think the word piracy is, especially in regards to Somali piracy with these attacks, it's a very complex word because it's attributed to so many reasons and people engage in it for different reasons. With all these attacks, rightfully so, people are saying, oh, these are hijackings, pirate attacks, but no one is looking at the origins of where this comes from. A lot of it is tied to illegal fishing, illegal foreign fishing, I should say. For example, foreign fishing boats that do not have permission from the local Somali authorities or the government to be there, but are still there anyway and are fishing. In particular, trawlers, they cause the most damage to the local communities that reside on the Somali coastline. Another thing it's tied to is the fragmentation and the weakness of the Somali state. As you know, Somalia has the longest coastline in mainland Africa, but the government doesn't have capacity to govern that space, to manage those waterways. So it leads to exploitation from, let's say, for example, foreign governments, foreign fishing companies, and as well as these armed groups active on the coastline.
There has been no claim of responsibility as of yet for some of the attacks that we've seen in recent weeks. But what do we know about how coordinated these attacks might be?
Yes, these attackers right now, what's known about them is oftentimes they hail from the communities, these coastal communities. So they are known to the local community and in some regards, the authorities. Another issue is in Somalia, you have to bear in mind the clan dynamics. Many of these attackers hail from particular clans and sub-clans who at times might have more firepower than the state. So the government is in a difficult position on whether to clamp down on them and spark resentment and backlash from the local community. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. The other issue is that based on the tribal system in Somalia, the government is, if they wanted to, they could attack them. But oftentimes what's happening is, like example, with some of these hijackers on board, they'll go through tribal leaders who represent these hijackers because all these hijackers hail from clans and each clan has a tribal leader. So what the local authorities will
Hmm.
do is they'll engage these tribal leaders who are representing these guys, not in the hijacking, but as constituents from their community to convince them to get off board the ship or to talk to them about, hey, what are you doing? What do you want? Things of that nature. So it plays into the tribal dynamics also is a big factor that I think gets unreported a lot.
Hmm. So, bringing us back to the Pakistani sailor that we heard at the top of our conversation, and an instance like this, what are the negotiations what would they look like to determine whether or not that vessel can go free?
It depends on the negotiation will be between the hijackers on board and the people they're speaking to. It could be the government, it could be the owners of the ship, it could be the governments of these foreign nationals who are on the ship. For example, these Pakistanis, they're on an oil tanker. That oil tanker is owned by a Somali businessman. the ship and oil, actually, So it would just depend on the actors involved and how they decide to settle it.
Hmm. Owned by a Somali businessman. Okay, well, then that brings me back to my question in going in a circle here about whether or not this is piracy. President Donald Trump recently was quoted using the term piracy just a couple of days ago. He did it a little bit jokingly. He's speaking at an event, he's at a podium, and he's talking about what the U.S. is doing in the Strait of Hormuz, blocking access for ships.
We took over the ship, we took over the cargo, took over the oil. It's a very profitable business. Who would have thought we were doing that? We're like pirates.
And so, taking us back to what you're saying, what we know about this tanker being blocked from leaving, even though it's owned by a Somali businessman and the alleged people who took the tanker are Somali pirates, what does that tell you? What connection are you making?
Well, when you mentioned Trump, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy when it comes to public discourse on addressing piracy. As you know, the U.S. has, as they like to put it, boarded or seized a lot of ships in the Strait of Hormuz or blocked them off, right? And then Somali pirates are doing pretty much the same thing, but only one gets viewed as criminality, aka piracy, when the other doesn't. So I think it's kind of just like hypocrisy, if that makes sense in a way.
Of course, that makes sense. And that's the point that I'm also seeing online. So I'm interested to hear how that is playing amongst people. So thank you for that. It also brings me to my next point, which is another actor who's been in these waters and in headlines for causing disruption to shipping routes. So I want to talk about where this is happening, because at the other end of the Gulf of Aden, you have the Houthis, who you mentioned, the Houthis in Yemen, who have been disrupting commercial shipping. Somali pirates recently hijacked the oil tanker Eureka, but much closer to Yemen than to Somalia. And some analysts have pointed out that you simply don't operate that close to Houthi-controlled coastline unless you have some kind of understanding. So from where you sit in Mogadishu, is there actual coordination happening between the Houthis and some of the leaders of these piracy groups?
Based on my observation, experience, and research, those saying there's some type of understanding or collaboration between the Houthis and Somali pirates, I believe it's akin to like the weapons of mass destruction 2003 Iraq, based off that. And the reason I say that is because these Somali pirates who are carrying out these attacks are members of the local community. Some have grievances, some are trying to exploit grievances, but whatever they be, these are locals. The Houthis, on the other hand, are totally different. When you say, like, for example, MT Eureka, that's another oil tanker that was hijacked, I believe, off the port of Qana in Yemen. I wouldn't say, like, some of these Western media reports are saying the Houthis could have facilitated, the Houthis could have done this. I don't think that. I just think it's these Somali pirates who are getting more bold and more unpredictable. That's how I look at it. I don't believe it's the Houthi connection. And those who try to push the connection between Somali pirates and Houthis, I feel like they're, in a way, advocating for more foreign intervention in that region. And if that does happen, it's ordinary Yemenis and Somalis who will suffer.
More with Mohamed after the break. Mohamed, for a lot of our audience, they will recall talk of piracy in the news a lot more in the early 2000s and 2010s, to the point where it even made it into pop culture. And a Somali American actor was nominated for an Oscar for his role in the movie Captain Phillips, which some saw as a pretty problematic film. But the film was about a ship being taken hostage by Somali pirates.
Listen up. We have been boarded by armed pirates. Stay hidden at all costs. Don't want any hostages.
We will follow the procedures, lock down, go dead in the water, and wait for help.
Stick together. It will be all right.
Take us back to that time period. Where did Somali piracy come from?
Yes, in 1991, when Somalia's last functioning central government collapsed, it led to a civil war. When the government collapsed, so did its state institutions and agencies and government apparatus that was met in place to protect the country's maritime resources. Once that happened, foreign trawlers from all over the world, including this region, came in, began taking fish, exploiting it, and making life more difficult for ordinary fishermen. As the years progressed, members of local communities started taking up arms. And then one thing led to another. When they take up arms, they started demanding ransoms. By the time it hit 2005, it started picking up and continued until the late 2000s, early 2010s, I would say, 2011, 12, until about 2012 when 40 governments deployed their navies into Somali waters to counter the piracy threat.
So do you remember how that conversation was playing in Somalia versus, because I know you also have experience in the US, were there differences in how you were seeing headlines and news about those events?
No, I think the headlines were the same, but I think perception differed. My time in the US, I noticed that the diaspora community, overwhelmingly, not everybody supported these guys, right? Like they were saviors of the sea, fighting back against foreign fisher. In Somalia, the same thing. They were viewed as Robin Hood, making millions of dollars in ransom and things of that nature. But the difference in Somalia is that whatever happens in that country, they face it firsthand, unlike the diaspora. So when these pirates started kicking off and getting millions of dollars in ransom, it led to a lot of issues in the local community. Weapons started were awash in the community, drugs, alcohol, prostitution. They brought a lot of vices to the community, which, as you know, Somalia is a conservative society. So a lot of people pushed back against this. That kind of diminished their reputation, I would say, from like Robin Hood to people who are bringing ills to the community.
Wow. Well, before the diminishment, then these jobs were seen as enticing because they were a way to make money?
Yes, yes. Especially Somalia has one of the highest unemployment rates in the world, as we know. And then particularly in the coastal regions, the vast majority depend on the sea for a livelihood. When foreign fishers come in and destroy that livelihood and forces many people further into poverty, then it pushes people to the brink. And once after a couple of ransoms get hit for multi-million, a lot of, like you said, a lot of young men are enticed. A lot of young men see this as an opportunity to, better their lives and that of their family. So they risk it all and take up arms at sea.
Well, Mohammed, at the height of this crisis, the World Bank estimated that the annual impact of piracy off Somalia on the global economy was close to $18 billion. But as you mentioned earlier, it dropped out of the headlines and basically disappeared because of this Western naval campaign. And as you're also saying, a grassroots campaign against the enticement of piracy. So why do you think it's now making a comeback? And do you see it returning to the levels that we saw back then?
I think as of this moment, it's too hard to say if it'll return to those levels. It'll depend on the current trajectory. Right now, this trajectory is unprecedented. If it continues like this, there's a possibility we might get back to that level. But then again, it's too early to say, just in my opinion. I also think the international community is watching very closely. The Gulf of Aden is right there, Indian Ocean, Bab el-Mandab and Red Sea are not too far away. I believe, honestly, if this doesn't stop or get under control, like they're going to just intervene, because they already have a lot of interest in that region geopolitically. You have numerous actors like Gulf states, Western powers, and Israel as well, active in that region. So I think this is like pretty much a frying pan waiting to blow, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Finally, Mohammed, what does all of this mean for Somalis on land, where you are?
I think it's going to lead to more difficulties. And the reason I say that is, if you personally asked me 10, 15 years ago, I would tell you, yep, good luck. I support the pirates, saviors of the sea. But as I get older and more mature, I realize they're actually harming their community. That's why I personally don't have sympathy for these pirates. Because with each pirate attack that happens, it's like pulling the tail of a snake. If you keep pulling on the tail, it'll eventually turn around and bite you. These pirates, the more attacks they carry out and more consistently, it's going to give the international community, namely the West, more reason to intervene in Somalia, not just by sea, but by land as well, right? And then that's going to make life more difficult for ordinary Somalis, right? This is a country and a society that has suffered for decades as a result of failed foreign intervention for decades. More foreign intervention is the last thing we need. But if these pirate attacks keep happening, that's what many people that I speak to in the country in different regions fear, that more intervention will come under pretext of counter-piracy. Yesterday, it was counterterrorism, and now counter-piracy is another fear.
Mohammed, thank you so much for your time and for walking us through this issue. I really appreciate it.
Yes, you too, Malika. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.